everyone. This is Rachel, and you're listening to the Gen Z Climate Being podcast. Today, I'm talking with Natalie Heller. Natalie is a current sophomore at university studying environmental studies. She loves to be outdoors, hike, snorkel, scuba dive, camp, and go backpacking. Natalie has always been an activist for mental health and a youth climate activist, so when the two met, it was a natural interest of hers. We hope you're enjoying these climate conversations and seeing all the different ways that young people are engaging with and being impacted in climate. Oh, Jesus fucking motherfucking shit. Hi, everyone. I am joined today on our little podcast series with Natalie. And I just gave a little introduction, but I'm going to invite Natalie to introduce yourself in the way you want to.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Heller. I am a current sophomore in college studying environmental studies, and I'm originally from San Francisco, California, and that's where I grew up and now living in LA, going to school here.
Hey, amazing. Um, as someone also from California, I'm just wondering what you love most about living here.
Oh, so many things. I love that you have the option of the beach, but then also like the redwoods and the mountains, and the snow. And I feel like it has so many different microclimates that you can do so much. Um, I'm most excited for right now in LA to go snorkeling in Catalina Island. Because like snorkeling and stuff like that is not really good in Northern California.
Mhm.
Or it's just really cold. But I'm so excited because there's just so many different types of climates here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's my favorite too. It's just like the diversity of ecology, and places, and the like proximity of them too is pretty amazing. And I have this really distinct memory of in seventh grade going on a Catalina trip with my class, and we snorkeled at night and saw all the bioluminescence in the
I've
water.
heard this that people have done. I really want to do that and explore Catalina.
It was amazing. Yeah, our world is an amazing place.
Yeah, it's very
um,
fun.
Along those lines, this is a podcast about climate and mental health and our collective climate being. And I'm curious, what does climate change mean to you? What does the problem of climate change mean to you? And did you think about climate differently when you were younger? How has kind of this evolved for you as you've grown up?
Yeah, it definitely has changed as I've gotten older. Um, I can kind of just start when I was young and when I kind of realized and noticed
Mhm.
about climate change and like what it was, what it means. Um, I first noticed that like something was happening when I was 12. So pretty young. What, like seventh grade, sixth, seventh grade. And I noticed it because I would go snorkeling, and just every year I would go back to the reefs, there would be less diversity of fish, and the coral would look different. And that's when I noticed like something's going on here. But I grew up in San Francisco. I didn't see much. We always grew up composting, and it's a very, I would classify it as like a green city.
Mhm.
There was always like, or ever since I was young, the paper straws, and then like you have to pay a fee for a plastic bag that then turns into no plastic bags, only paper bags. So I feel like I grew up around a lot of climate initiatives,
Mhm.
but it wasn't until I saw something that I loved doing being hurt by it. Um, and so back then, climate change meant like, oh, we've all heard it. It's climate change. It's bad. We should do something. But like, I'll let that be for somebody else to figure out. And then as I got older, I quickly realized that that somebody else has to be somebody. And if nobody wants to be that person, then it's never going to happen. Um, I remember eighth grade was the first time we like mentioned it in our science class.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we went on like our own version of a climate protest on one of those days. I think it was a Friday that like other people were also protesting. So we like went across the street and had signs and whatever. And that's when I realized, like, okay, we are this next generation that has to do something. Um, but I didn't really start getting involved in actually learning about what it means and what climate change versus global warming versus what it means for my future, stuff like that, until I was in high school. When I started working with a youth-led organization that was all about climate education and justice and all these other things. And when I was working with them, that's when I realized that climate change is something that is already here, and clearly we are facing so many of its um, catastrophes
Mm-hmm.
already. So, like in high school, that's when climate change was like, okay, this is my thing now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then I learned what climate emotions were. Because climate change was something that I was really passionate in trying to educate people on and like doing my best personally to do things that can combat climate change and stuff like that. But what I quickly realized was that I was just working so much in high school on top of being a normal kid and going to classes and being an athlete and stuff like that. Um, so then climate change and like this movement really shifted for me, I think, during my senior year of high school when I saw climate change not as this, well, it is this threat that needs to be solved now, but it shifted into it's a threat, but it needs to be solved for every generation to come. It's so less of a sprint, more of this forever going marathon, I guess. Because I was personally getting burnt out on all the things that I was doing, but then I realized the whole goal is to make the climate able to sustain all the future generations and not just like the next one or two or three. Um, so that's when I really started to recognize climate emotions and how I got involved with the mental health aspect of climate change and how, I mean, it's not the first thing that people think of when they think of climate change, but it's something that people are going to start thinking about a lot more is because it's on everyone's mind all the time 24/7 and people have these emotions, they don't know what they are, they don't know what they're called, they don't have practices to help ease them or people to connect with about them. So that's how I got involved with climate emotions and climate mental health. Yeah.
Thank you for taking us through that. And it's so much to hold as just like a young person navigating how to be human, just like how to live. And I something I've been reminding myself recently is like, oh, this is everyone's, I guess depending on your beliefs, this is everyone's first time like being a human in this world, and we're all just trying to like experiment and process and grow and and it's just like there's so much and the way that I think climate we don't always realize like the way that climate is living in us in so many ways. Like I think about we're both, I'm not in LA currently, but I'm from LA. Um you're in LA right now, and we just had an ongoing wildfires just raging through Southern California, and just the mental health effects of that disaster, the emotions of losing homes and places you love, and land, and also how, like, physically our bodies, like the smoke, the
Yeah.
toxic air that's in us. There's just so many ways that it impacts our, mind and body. And you were talking about, one of the emotions that has arisen for you on your journey is this feeling of burnout. And I'm wondering what are kind of your touchstones to keep you grounded, and keep you kind of keep you okay with at this, like, on one hand it's such an urgent problem, and on the other hand we really need to slow down and be in touch with our bodies and ourselves and our emotions and those around us, and kind of what brings you back down into that slower rhythm and kind of realigns your nervous system. And something I was thinking about in hearing you talk, you mentioned like snorkeling, and the coral, and I'm wondering, like, do you think about that coral often? Is that kind of a, like, touchstone that can bring you back and remember like what we are working towards?
Yeah, yeah, I do think about like snorkeling coral all the time, and like being in the ocean. I think that is like my happy place, and those like that's such a passion of mine. So that just reminds me of like how I got started and why I really am doing any of this is because like I love seeing nature and it's like most pristine way that it's supposed to live in and thrive in. Um, but I think for the burnout part is I really learned that the hard way. I
Hmm.
didn't know I was burnt out till I was absolutely completely burnt out. Like, couldn't check another email, didn't have it in me to go to a Zoom. Like, just because I was running so fast. It was like I would wake up, go to school, go to practice, have like 3 hours of climate um, organizing meetings, stuff for the organization, which I loved. I loved it so much, but it was just a lot. And then I would do my homework and then go to sleep and do it all over again for definitely 5 days a week. And then Sundays, we would have meetings that would go up to like 5 hours. So that's when I only really noticed I was burnt out till I was reflecting on it. And I was like, I was doing a part-time job, um, while also trying just to be a teenager and do
Hmm.
like the high school things. So now I decided like after I decided I was burnt out, I took a long break. And obviously, I still read the news and I educate myself, but I just took a break from doing such intense work where you're constantly thinking about the doom. And there is some nice wins, but like majority of it is pretty um, gloomy.
Hmm.
Um, but now I think I have created a situation where I still work and I still contribute and I'm still a part of this process and movement of climate activism, but that I also make time for like normal things to do in my life. That's not just school and then this work. Um, so like seeing my friends more and just like doing other hobbies like hiking or trying new restaurants, things that have nothing to do with, or everything has some part to do with climate change, but like not immediately related, has really helped me with that.
Where you can just feel like you're living without this.
Yeah. And
constant like existential.
like this like thing in my brain that's just like, oh, you got to go back to work. Like we have to do work because it is this like pressing issue.
Mhm.
But something that I did an interview with my mom, and we talked about the differences, and she was like, she never really heard of climate change till she was like 30 or 40, or really had kids and started noticing that like she wanted to have a plastic free house because it was just like good for kids to not be around that and stuff like that. And so, versus like my childhood was the complete opposite. Like, I'm completely surrounded by it, always thinking about it. And even like my brothers who aren't really in this work, but they still know the stories, they still read about it, and can feel the effects of um, climate change in their childhoods as well. So I think that's just a very interesting point to bring up, is like how our parents were completely like in a different situation of like carefree climate change versus like a lot of people growing up now. It's like a very prominent thing and everyone really knows about it.
Yeah, even though that is really interesting. Even though it's like obviously the climate and the earth was changing while they were children, but it is different the way that I think for my generation, your generation. I'm like a zillennial. I was born in 96. I don't know. I feel like the boundaries are porous. Um but I feel like we were just inundated with it at such a young age and like had such a deep awareness
Yeah.
of maybe it just I think we are very aware of the way in which like all the systems are kind of collapsing in a
Yeah.
sense and are not working and are all interconnected and that the values that have orientated the world as we know it like are are not are not the world that we want to live in. Um, because I was also really young when climate became really central to like who I was as a person. I was like 8 or 9. And I could imagine too that's as a lot for like a parent to have their young child like going through this awakening and not really having had their own climate journey or understanding of it like that must be really hard too like I'm wondering how that your felt for your mom and were you able has she gone on her own climate journey has the education been through you mostly um sounds like you grew up like in an environmentally aware place and household, but I am curious about that.
Yeah, I think majority of it is a lot of it stems from me. Like I was the one who decided that we should all switch to like laundry detergent sheets because it just has less plastic waste. Or a lot of them I would call like sustainable swaps, just like swapping things out of our household. Um, but since I mean they've just been in San Francisco for so long, I think a lot of these practices are just like come to them naturally versus like if someone grew up somewhere else and they didn't really, they're like, what the heck is compost? Like, since we've been
Yeah.
doing that since like my birth, um, that has helped in the city, also has helped in the climate education, but I think a lot of it is like me, because I want to do this and then I just switch it out in the household, and I'm lucky enough that like my parents support that and are like okay, and they're not like stuck on their ways. Um, and then I do think like both my parents read the news a lot, but I feel like it's different when it comes from a child, like your child is super worried about something versus just the news and like, oh yes, it's happening and yes, it's bad and it's sad, but like, we won't do anything. Um, if it comes from me and I have such deep such deep emotions around it, then it's like, wait, this person actually really really cares about this. Like we should care about this too, and it on a deeper level, I guess. So I do
Mhm.
think I've seen that with them and my brothers as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of, I don't know, there is this kind of way in which I feel like I've grown this really like closer, more beautiful connection with my family, like through my climate journey. Um, and I think like realizing how important that intergenerational piece is in all of this, like, is so critical and something that we really need to focus on. And I think something else that's interesting is like you kind of telling about your childhood in San Francisco, and there's this way in which like because there's these external structures in place in the city, like they have this value of sustainability and caring about place. It's like those structures inform like your internal values, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's interesting in thinking about like how change happens and how we need this great like cultural shift, and we need to be shifting our hearts. And I think that can sometimes move in lots of different ways, but one of those is like having those external structures that then influence like what we care about.
Yeah, it was so interesting moving across the country to place and like meeting so many people that didn't know that because um one of the first things like my roommate and I talked about was like, oh, where do we put like the eggshells after you like make eggs in the morning? I was like, oh, the compost, and she's like, oh, but we don't have a compost here, and I was like, oh my god, it feels so weird putting my food scraps in the garbage, but like that's what they just do in this city. Um, and like the same with recycling. I always grew up like collecting our like cans and glass, and then we would all go to the recycling center and like watch it get sorted. And I quickly realized that's not many people's experiences. So it's so interesting about how how the city really did inform a lot of my knowledge.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never watched like recyclables being sorted up close. I think,
It's so fun.
yeah, I mean, I think that's so important because it's like this way in which we need to have this intimate, like seeing and knowing of the things that make up our world. That was really abstract. But I mean, like, for example, your story about seeing the coral at such a young age, like you had this intimate face-to-face moment with like, oh my gosh, like this thing I love has changed so drastically. Um, and it's like I think I think Joanna Macy says this, that like what we grieve shows us what we love,
Hmm.
almost like points to what we love. And I think just like, I don't know, we need to always be, I think, reminded, especially in the climate space, of like what we are trying to move towards and not just away from, and to like visualize that coral thriving and that ecosystem thriving, like finding like something that we love and know to like keep moving us. Um,
Yeah. Well, I think it's such an important thing to like, yeah, visualize what a sustainable future looks like because it's kind of hard to fight for something if you don't really know what it's going to look like.
yeah.
And you
Oh,
get so much more maybe like inspiration or power if you can visualize and see and like there are mock-ups of like what it could look like if it's not like if it's not all dead or stuff like that. Um, yeah, so visualizing and like the imagery is um, so crucial in the space as well.
mhm. It's incredibly powerful. And I think to move our conversation a bit into education and climate learning, I think it's something that needs to be a part of climate education, especially for young people, of like envisioning and imagining these better futures, these more earth aligned, people centered futures. Because I know in my learning, in my education around climate, it was so completely and narrowly like doom and gloom and very much detached from like any acknowledgement that this is your future. It was like, here's this kind of abstract science that feels distance from your life, even though it's like affecting us here and now. And we just, I would imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine like your experience is similar of we weren't really given any space or time or structures to like process our emotions around what we're learning, or to talk about what systems we wanted to like. There was none of that.
I had a very similar, I honestly don't really remember what we learned in elementary school, but if it wasn't that memorable, then it couldn't have been um, that inspiring. But I just, it's interesting to take classes now as an older person on climate change and on systems like this because it's so interesting how based off the professor it depends on like what the emotional tone of the course is,
Mhm.
which I think is fascinating. But going back to like elementary school levels, I don't even think we were really like in science, we maybe had like a 1 day unit on it that was basically probably summed up to be like climate change is bad, this is what's happening, nothing about how to change it,
Mhm.
nothing really about what things can be put in place to help combat it. Um, I mean, let alone climate emotions, like that's not a part of it. Um, but it's interesting because now when I'm taking a class, I was just in a class last week and the professor was talking about climate change and his perspective was something that completely shocked me. And he was like, everyone says that climate change is so bad and it'll change everything. And he was like, actually, it won't. It's gonna change things, but they're not gonna completely go away. So we like took the coral example, and he was like, it's not gonna be as but it's not gonna be as vibrant. There's not gonna be as many fish, but there still will be reefs. And I was like, I've never heard this before, because every time I talk or hear about what climate change looks like for reefs is like it it's just gonna become kind of like a dead zone, like no fish
Yeah.
will go there and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I thought that was interesting. I don't necessarily agree with him, but that's just how he set the tone for the second day of classes,
Mhm.
which I thought that was interesting on how
Yeah.
he's teaching us.
Yeah, that is. I would love to talk to him more. I do love though that it's not black and white. I feel like so much of our thinking around climate and stuff I've heard in some activist spaces are like, it's either like we're doomed, everything is destroyed, um, it's all gone, or we like save the world in some like utopia kind of. It's very, I don't know. I just think there is so much more nuance and complexity in what change really looks like,
Yeah.
you know? Even in the fires, and not to belittle like the devastations or the way like the ecology of people's lives have been totally just torn apart. But it's like, I know fires spark a lot of native plant growth. Like, there's this way that we just need to move away, I think, from this like dualistic framing of it's all lost or it's all saved, because I
Yeah.
don't think it's either. I think it's something else.
And I guess that's what I appreciate about that, um, like him telling us that, because in ways he's right. It's like all of a sudden, in one like snap of a finger, life isn't going to go away on the reefs. It's just going to look different, and the fish are going to change, and the coral's going to adapt and or pass away. But it is like it's true. It's not all going to just like vanish, but it's going to take time for it to rebuild if it wants to get back to like what it could be. So I guess that's what's missing in a lot is the complexity of what it would look like. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think we just don't really know. I feel like there's I mean, some things we do really know about climate, but I do think there is still so much uncertainty, which I really, it helps me to kind of hold on to that and to be curious about what things can be like. And I don't know, that helps me to move to move forward, to keep going.
Yeah, totally.
So, um, I'm wondering if you could reimagine what climate education looks like, what would it look like? What are kind of maybe the main things that you would change if you could create your own kind of climate learning model? And would it be in the science room? Would it be out of the science room? Um, what would that look like?
Yeah, I don't know I don't know what it looks like today, but from when it was like 10 years ago, um, I think climate education could be more talked about more, but not in an overwhelmingly way, I guess. So more than just a week spent on it, but not every single class. I think also something that's super important is I'm a super fan of hands-on learning and like incorporating projects like that for these young kids who are, I don't know, first to sixth, seventh, eighth grade, so pretty young, like doing things that um, you are just creating humans that love the earth. So that could be like talking about gardening and like fun things like that, but also then as you get older, like talking about what is physically happening to the chemicals, stuff like that in science class or um, but I don't also think it has to be limited to just science class because it is more than just science. It's like humanities as well, and like talking about emotions. And I know a lot of schools now they do talk about emotions and like this is what I'm feeling now. Let me talk it through. Stuff like that. Climate emotions is still something that not many people know about, let alone like a fifth grader.
Mhm.
Um, what else? Oh, I just think you could have so much fun with it because it
Right.
doesn't have to be like climate change education. It could just be like world or like earth education, if that makes sense. Just like
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
making the like little humans almost love the earth and like showing them how cool earth is and like the land around you and the natural and native species around you and what kind of ecosystems are around you and like basically just saying this is so cool, like let's go explore that. Because then in turn they're probably likely, if you're just like an earth loving human, then you'll likely know and understand that climate change is bad and you learn that later in life as well.
Yes, I really feel that vision. I align with that vision. I love what you said about creating humans that love the earth. I think that should be just like the role of teachers. And and you're right that in creating and guiding young people towards being earth loving humans, I think then we naturally support and are in relationship to systems that support people and the humanity of us all, right? It's like caring for the earth is caring about people is caring about the earth, is how I think of it and feel it. So I really love that. um, I want to end with asking you what climate emotions are most present for you in this moment. And I know for me personally, like they kind of change pretty constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But in this moment in time, what climate emotions are present?
I think in this like current like hour, um, it's been very inspiring, motivating, pretty positive emotions. But I know, I mean, just a week ago, it was like glued to my phone, looking at fires, like total guilt and sadness and like complete opposite spectrum of emotions. But currently, I feel very motivated, very inspired. Um, yeah.
If you're comfortable, I'm curious like where those emotions live in your body. Like do you feel those emotions in certain places in your body or like how does that feel for you?
Oh, I guess it mainly manifests. I've never really thought about this. Um, I want to say like my brain and my mind. I feel like the emotion that I'm feeling really informs how my day is gonna go on things unrelated to climate. Um, so like if I'm feeling motivated and positive, I'll likely be able to get my homework done, stuff like that. So I guess it like lives in my brain mindset area of like I decide what outlook I want to have on the world today.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so important. And I read this quote recently. I forgot who said it. I'll insert it later, but the saying is that no feeling is final.
Mm,
And I really love that because I think it speaks to the way things are constantly shifting and changing and we don't have to be stuck in one place. Um, and it's okay to be feeling dread and deep sadness around climate. And it's also okay to be feeling joy and optimism and to have like this complex range um, of emotions. So Thank you for sharing that. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or we can wrap it up?
I think that's pretty much it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Natalie, for having this conversation with me, and I hope that we can all continue to be humans that love the earth.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Yay, thanks.